Welcome to ACC Nation, featuring sports news and special guest interviews. Here's Will Ojanen and Jim Quist.
This is ACC Nation's Virginia football preview with the publisher of Wahoos 24/7. She's an award-winning journalist covering a wide range of sports at Mr. Jefferson School. And here to take a look at the 2024 version of the Cavaliers is our special guest, Jacquie Franciulli. Thank you, Jacquie, for joining us and talking about Virginia football.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to have football back. I just got out of practice about an hour ago, so it's just nice to talk to the players again, but also seeing football rather than just talking about it.
Before Will jumps in here and starts down the path, tell us where you are, because it may mean something special to people who are Cavalier fans.
Sure. I'm actually on Barracks Road Shopping Center. I grabbed some dinner right after practice. So I'm at Chopped right now, trying to be healthy a little bit after a summer filled of theme parks and all the other junk food that I have with my kids. Try to get some grain in my system.
There you go. Well,
it looks like a nice night there. So save some of that weather for me when I come down in 2 months.
It was 90 degrees weather earlier. It was hot during that
practice. Take that back. But it was, even though the record didn't indicate it, but the team was a lot more competitive last year. I think I did the math as the season went on. I think 9 of the 12 games were one-score games at one point entering the fourth quarter, and it just feels like they're there. It's just a matter of execution in this season. What is it going to take for them to kind of get over the top this year?
Well, I mean, Coach Rodzinski said it best. I think it was 1,400 snaps made by a true freshman last year because of so many injuries that UVA had. So obviously experience is one. This is a very experienced team. I mean, I actually spoke to a couple of the players and I said, you know what? It feels like you guys have a lot of old men on the team. I mean, Cam Butler's in his mid-20s now. He came into Virginia. He had 1 year of eligibility left. Now he's in his 3rd year at Virginia. You have, Brian Stevens, a guy who's also kind of edging that mid-20s age as well. Antonio Clary, who I also call as a grandfather because I feel like I've seen him for years too. So there's a lot of guys here that have not only the experience on the field, but also that maturity that comes when you're older. And those are the guys who are kind of taking over the leadership roles and trying to get these younger guys comfortable with everything. But also, one of the things when you look last year was special teams, right? You saw all some of these games really was decided by one circumstance. I think it was 2 games, the JMU and Louisville, that was, you can say, decided by one punt blocked for a touchdown. That could have been the difference in their season is special teams. So this year, because they have more experience depth, and they have quality depth at several positions, whether getting to the transfer portal, your hypothesis, you're hoping that means they're going to have more veterans on special teams and more guys that they can use, more bodies, because that's where everything kind of fell apart for them. By the time they got to the fourth quarter, they didn't have enough veteran bodies or more to depth in a lot of these positions. So they're tired. When you're in a close game, you're losing your focus. You're making silly penalties. You're making silly decisions. So that's a difference that Virginia had last year. You're hoping that they did enough in the offseason to prevent a lot of those mistakes this year.
Quarterback competition, I think it's going to literally go up to snap one of the season. We obviously have Tony Muskett back, who decided to come back and has progressed really, really well from offseason surgery. And then Anthony Calandra, who was kind of the glitz and glamour. But Muskett's the more sturdy guy, more even kill kind of guy. How are they looking so far?
Well, today we actually got to see him throw the ball, which is very nice. I haven't seen him throw yet since fall camp started due to rain the first day. But both of them look crisp. And one thing, if you look at both Anthony Calandra and Tony Muskett, is you can see that they added a little bit more muscle. I feel like Anthony was a little more wider up in the shoulders. So they definitely worked in the weight room. And I think what the coaches are saying, this is a true first true off season for this team. I mean, Elliott came in the first year, he was a brand new coach. Second year, off the field issues, obviously, with everything that they were on emotionally, this team. And then this year is a true time to go to this strength and conditioning program, right? So you're seeing that from their bodies as well. They both look good. They both had the respect of the locker room. So that's the big thing, right? Because when you have a quarterback battle, you don't want to have any cliques. You don't want, hey, this is the Anthony Calandra team or this is the Tony Muskett team. Like you don't want that divisiveness in the locker room. And it seems like that's not the case. Everyone understands that it's a quarterback competition. Even the quarterback room, they're very supportive of each other. And going into this, I kind of agree with you. It's going to be, I mean, even if technically like behind closed doors, they might know who the starter is. One, the coaches are not going to reveal their hand that quickly. But two, I think you have an ability to have a quarterback competition because you have two guys that have, know how to win. They've at least won in a Power 5 program, and they both have an ability to lead this offense. And they both have experience now with this offensive line because it's the first time we're going to have veterans returning in front of them. So I think this is a very different situation that, Virginia has had in the last 3 years. So this is a quarterback competition that's going to go on. I think a lot of people forget that Tony Muskett has the ability to throw a very nice ball down the field and is a pretty accurate pass catcher. I think last year what you saw is the guy opened up his career at Virginia against Tennessee in Nashville for a neutral game, and then he was hurt. I mean, you haven't seen Muskett fully healthy yet in a Virginia uniform. So that, and also you haven't seen him with an offensive line that it was sure. I mean, Brian Stevens wasn't even his center yet when he first started at Virginia. That was something that happened a couple games later at Maryland. So this is where the comfortability will happen. So I think Tony Muskett will provide you that steadiness of a veteran. On the other hand, I think Anthony Colandrea is a little bit more mature. That's something that other coaches have said. Des Kitchings has said it. Brian Stevens said it today. So you can see that maturity and the extra year he has. I mean, he said I feel like I'm entering my 3rd season at Virginia because I had that extra spring as well. So I think Virginia is in a good spot. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in a spot where you have two guys that could start at Virginia, and also you have an O-line that finally has guys who have game experience? I mean, I think Tony Elliott's like, wow, I could actually have a starting 5 that ended last year. It's going to start this year. I think he's smiling at that point.
And let's get into that O-line a little bit. And we've talked about Stevens and how his transition to center actually made things so much smoother because they weren't getting ground balls back to the quarterback after that point. But the continuity really is something Tony Elliott does not have, which makes me think that this O-line is going to be much better this year.
Right. So the only problem we have right now is that Virginia practice today, Mikhail Boley was seen with a boot and he had a cane. So Tony Elliott said doesn't think it's long-term. Now, unfortunately, this injury happened over the weekend, so they only got scans today. So we'll know by the end of the week where the injuries are, but he's hoping to have Mikhail Boley back in a week or two. But theoretically, they would have him, Noah Josie, Brian Stevens, Ty Furnish, and Blake Steed all coming back. You also have Ugana Nana, who can, alternate in at guard if necessary. You also have other guys that have experience in that offensive line. The issue that I have with the O-line is who's the next guys up, right? So Noah Hartzell, who was kind of making his way on there as a walk-on. He earned a scholarship last year. He was given one. He was the backup center for Brian Stevens because once Ty Furnish went to guard, they didn't want to kind of alternate him and Brian Stevens if necessary. So Noah Hartzell kind of won that battle for the 2D. Now he's out for the season. So my question is, who's next if Brian Stevens is hurt? Obviously, you don't want Brian Stevens to be hurt. He's your best offensive lineman, honestly, one of the best players on your team. You don't want him out. But that is a question you have to ask. So you guys, you have Ty Furnish, who's also taking snap there. You have Noah Josie taking snaps there as well. You have Joey Cagle taking snaps there. You've got Dawson Alters and then Grant Ellinger taking snaps there. So even though you have that starting 5, you have to keep looking at who's next. You're looking at Jimmy Christ. You're looking at Houston Curry. You're looking at Charlie Patterson. Those are the guys, and Ko Serber, who's coming into the second year. Those are the guys that need to step up because at the end of the day, you're not going to have 5 offensive linemen healthy for the entire year. And you want guys to rotate sometimes, especially a game against Richmond. You want an ability to have more guys out there to get more experience and also just get them a little bit of rest too. So that is the question for Virginia. Do they have 6, 7, and 8? Because I think any offensive line coach will tell you they want at least 8 guys to be ready to go for game day. So that's my question for Virginia. I think it's great that they have those 5 because not only you'll have them familiar with these guys on offense, with those quarterbacks, and then with the tight end room, you have guys like, Sage Ennis, you got Tyler Neville, you also got Sackett Wood back for another year after he got an NCAA waiver. All of those guys will happen pass protection. And actually, I joked from a reporter today during practice, I've never seen 3 full groups of offensive line practicing at the exact same time. since I've been covering Virginia again, because they've always been hurt. So seeing that, and then seeing them work with the tight end room, which has also been hit by injuries since I've been here on the UVA beat. They were mostly there. I think there was only Carson Gay on the tight end room that wasn't practicing. And then in the offensive line groups, also Mikhail Boley. Everyone was practicing pass protection and running protection, doing a drill out there, working on that. And that is huge for Virginia, who, again, since I've been at UVA's beat, since the last year for Uncle Mendenhall, we haven't seen that at practice because they were always down on numbers.
The wide receiver room I like. Obviously, Malik Washington was a gem and is now in the NFL, but they brought in several receivers out of the portal in addition to returning Malachi Fields and J.R. Wilson, who I read today is also a little bit banged up. But I like that this receiver room is deeper than it's been in recent years.
I agree. I think it's going to be, I know when you talk to Des Kitchen, he's like, who am I going to toss the ball to? Because he was saying, I can guarantee there's going to be 5 offensive linemen on the field. There's going to be 1 running back on the field. And there's going to be a quarterback on the field. Everyone else, well, it's up for grabs. Who's going to get those positions? And like I said, you have tight end guys too. Tyler Neville, who can catch a nice ball from Harvard. So you've got him as a possible pass catcher. You have those wide receivers. You have Chris Tyree, if he's healthy, obviously he's also in the booth as well. So you have him that can work that kind of the Malik Washington role in the slot. But you also have to be careful that, Malik Washington was a heck of a player. He came in here, saw an opportunity, and broke records. You're not expecting Chris Tyree, to beat Malik Washington. Chris Tyree is Chris Tyree, Malik Washington's Malik Washington. But what you're hoping is that Malachi Fields and Malik Washington, what they did was that defenses had to defend both of them, right? So when you go at Malachi Fields, you forget Malik Washington and vice versa. So that's what you're hoping with a Chris Tyree and a Malachi Fields. And Malachi Fields, you're hoping that he's added a little bit of more muscle up top. You're hoping that he's be able to shoulder and win those one-on-one battles because of his frame in the end zone. And then when you look at, you look at Trell Harris. I mean, I feel like we're not talking about Trell Harris enough when you look at the talent that he brings to the table. And also Andre Green Jr. as well, another in-state kid who came back home. You look at him as well. He had some nice catches today. I feel like those two are one of those guys that silently came in. I feel like they got buzz on the recruiting trail, but I think Chris Tyree being that first wide receiver commit in from the transfer portal, kind of people still focusing on him. Granted, he's very speedy and he's going to be asset on special teams too. But those 2 other additions I feel like, are 2 that can really help Virginia kind of spread the ball out and provide nice depth for the wide receiver room. Because last year, when you look at what Virginia had as far as the passing game, they had Malik Washington, Malachi Fields. That was it. They never had a 3rd wide receiver kind of move up, and they missed that. That adds so much depth to your offense. So they're hoping not only the Tyler Neville and the tight end room and Sage Ennis can provide that extra pass catching ability, but they're hoping they have a 3rd wide receiver finally emerge in this group. And I think this year, because of those transfers, they're able to do that.
I am one of those people that feel like this team needs more success in the run game. And let's be real, it because of the lack of continuity and the O-line depth, it just hasn't been there since Tony Elliott's been there. Could with that potential continuity, the offensive line, could that make the running game be better this year?
If they stay healthy. That running back room needs to stay healthy. Noah Vaughn didn't practice today. So you're hoping that these guys stay healthy. Kobe Pace, you're hoping he stays healthy. And the running, it's like running backs and linebackers. Those are the guys that will get hit constantly in the football field. And you're hoping those 2 groups stay healthy. And with running back, that was one thing that, I feel like Virginia played with the idea of adding another running back in the room when it comes to the portal. They just never had that, I guess, guy that stood out to them, that kind of got what they wanted. You're always looking for that type of guy. So in that room right now, I know the coaches are very excited about Kobe Pace. Xavier Brown, I mean, we haven't seen him play since, his freshman year because he was hurt last year and even got re-hurt in the spring. So you're hoping Xavier Brown could be healthy because he adds a whole dimension to that running game. The only thing is for him is you're hoping he can get over that first tackle and avoid that first one so he can stay up a little bit longer. And then Noah Vaughn, just stay healthy for him. I think he provided some nice flashes in the spring. Jack Greasy is one that I keep hearing is people really excited about his potential in this running back room. So yeah, they do have bodies there. It's just, can they get consistency there? but also they need to stay healthy. At the end of the day, if they're not healthy in that room, that's where you're starting to get a little bit worried there.
Jacquie, before we jump into the defense, I need to ask this question, and you've touched on it briefly at the beginning of this conversation in regards to Tony Elliott and everything that he has had challenge-wise, this program has had challenge-wise over the last couple of years. And there's been a lot of talk in different corners. I think mainly where I'm hearing it is outside of the UVA circle, more so than in it, that he is on a hot seat, or he could be on a hot seat. I tend to look at it as being lukewarm at best because of all the things that you point out. I mean, you can't, I don't think that you can say that this man has been in a position to be fully up and running with this program since he took over. It just hasn't been there because of all the different things. Now, what I'd like to hear from you is what you're hearing on the inside and from fans and from other people that you work with, and is he in a position where he has to worry about his job, or are people looking at it from a practical standpoint and going, let's give him the proper amount of time to succeed?
I think it kind of, like you said, kind of depends on who you talk to around the program. A lot of people understand the difficulties that Tony Elliott has been dealt with. I mean, there's no other team, no other program in this country, no other coach that's had to go through what Tony Elliott and his staff have had to go through. I mean, you having to go out recruiting 2 weeks after you had to say farewell to 3 of your players because of a shooting is certainly something that no college coach, no person, no human being thinks they're going to go through, right? There's no playbook for that. And then having to go to living rooms and talk to parents who are nervous about their child going to a school that just had a school shooting. I mean, that's a lot to take in when you're still in mourning. When if you're a father, you're saying goodnight to your kids and you're traveling, and also you have to tell these parents about their kids that passed away. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, these coaches had to go through a lot. These players had to go through a lot emotionally. So even when they came back in January after that, I mean, football is the last thing on their minds. So this offseason, they truly were student athletes. They were football players. They got to do those workouts that they wanted. So, and I think a lot of people understand that. Now, this is still a college football business. And sadly, business, sometimes you got to take the emotion out of it. And I think that's the part where you are hearing a little bit of a buzz there. But I think there's a certain difference in what people view as a success. I mean, if Virginia can show steady progress from last year, if they're having the same issues constantly, then you might see the seat getting a little hotter. But if you show that things are improving, if you show special teams are starting to improve, if you show that, hey, we have a plan, we have balanced out our roster, and we have done this through recruiting a high school front and also through the portal, then you can start saying, this is our plan forward. If you don't show that there's a plan forward, then that's when the issues start causing. I think the first 4 games of this season is going to be very important for this team. It feels really funny for me to say that first game against first ACC game at Wake Forest could be one of the most pivotal games of their season because it's so early in the year. But that could really dictate how this year goes for them, right? Because those 4 games, I don't want to say you have to start 4-0, but if you're hoping for a bowl game, when you're traveling to South Bend to face Notre Dame, when you're traveling to Death Valley to face Clemson, you're looking at those 4 games and saying, these are our most winnable games of the season. You want to start with that nice momentum. Especially when you have these guys healthy at the start of the season. So I feel like that's going to be where you're going to see the true where he is. I think right now, everyone understands that Tony Elliott, this is his first true off season. So this is when you start grading him and his staff. It's something that I've been adamant about. And anytime I've spoken is that this is when you start grading him. And even for recruiting, I've always said that the 25 class is when you start grading him. Just because the way things occurred in Tony Elliott's tenure at Virginia, you can never grade him. This is his first full class recruiting. So this is when you can start saying, okay, I don't like this, I don't like that, but he's moving this way. So this is when you start kind of determining how this staff and how this tenure will kind of move forward.
I think what Will pointed out at the very beginning, from the standpoint of how close some of these losses were, very, very close at last season, was a good indication of where this team is going offensively. And based upon what the two of you have talked about, the offense for the Wahoos at this point this season, that's very promising. That's something that I think everybody ought to feel very good about, if you can get over some of these injury humps. The defense last year, of course, that's the one thing that people will poke you in the eye with at UVA, because last year the defense was last in the ACC. Now, the question is, will it improve? And as you point out, are we going to see some progression here? And on that note is where I'm going to hand it off to Will and let him roll with you.
Well, the theme of, I think I heard Jackie on with Bud Elliott doing the summer school, and just in the little bit we've done here, it's this will succeed if they stay healthy. Unfortunately, they've already been bitten by the injury bug twice in camp, with Mekhi Buchanan and Stevie Bracey probably done for the season. So that already saps some of the depth this defense has. But we've talked about this defensive line. I feel like this is where I think if everyone stays healthy, there's room for improvement, because Cam Butler is a sack machine. This team, outside of him and those 4 games played, nobody could really get any sacks. And I feel like if this line stays healthy, they're going to be much better this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's remarkable, right? When he was healthy, he had 3.5 sacks up until that game against NC State, and then he got hurt. And then Virginia had that last in the ACC for it comes to sacks. They just couldn't get to the quarterback. But yeah, it's like you have to keep saying, if this team is healthy, they're going to be pretty decent on the defensive line, because you have so many veterans on this team. I mean, you have Cam Butler and Chico Bennett on the edges. Then you have Jameer Carter in the middle, and even the young guy, Jason Hammond, and Michael Diatta, he's a veteran too. I mean, he's a guy who understands the defense. He's been there around as well. So you have him. So you have guys who have experienced this defense, understand what they expect of you. And they have good depth in the defensive tackle role. I mean, Anthony Britton, I've heard a lot of good things about him as well. Him and Jason Hammond have both kind of added some good muscle weight. Jason, I actually spoke to him today. He is the same weight, but he doesn't look the same weight because he's leaned out and gained more muscle on it. So he's got good weight. So that's good for them, how they've kind of changed their bodies and had better conditioning. But again, you have to stay healthy up front. And then they added Dorian Jones at linebacker, which is very necessary, because to expect James Jackson and Cam Robinson to be fully healthy for the entire year, like I said, in the running back room, the linebackers, they will probably expect to get dinged up a little bit here. So you want to have some healthy rotation there. Unfortunately, Stevie Bracey is hurt, but you're hoping guys like Trey McDonald will kind of step up, and hopefully you won't have to go to the freshman Miles Brown, but you have that as well for added depth. So Dorian Jones, I expect to play. James Jackson has been wearing a non-contact bib during camp, but Tony Elliott said that's more precautionary. Now, the area that I'm more concerned with is actually the secondary, because they didn't add depth to corner. They added Kempton Shine and Jam Jackson, but they wanted to add one more in the portal, and they couldn't manage that because they just couldn't find the right fit, right? And in the spring, they didn't have as much options when they were looking, because at the end of the day, you just don't want to pick a corner because you need a corner. You have to find the right fit. And obviously with UVA's transfer issues when it comes to academics and transfer credits, it's a little harder. But who they got, they're actually really happy about. Kempton Shine has been one that they say has shined a little bit. Kempton Shine. There you go. They think he's done a really good job this fall camp, and he did a good job in the spring. Him, Jam Jackson, and Dre Walker are the 3 corners that kind of jumped out a little bit during fall camp. I think the one player that I feel is not talked enough is Antonio Clary. He was hurt last year with an ankle injury. I know a lot of people are focusing on Jonas Sanker. To be fair, he is one of the best ACC safeties, and Corey Thomas coming in as a transfer. But Antonio Clary is someone that was very missed last year. And Cam Butler kind of explained to me when I talked to him at ACC kickoff, he said that Antonio Clary was the gel in the backfield in the defense. He was the one that was vocal and communicating between the guys in the secondary to the linebacker and linebackers to the defensive line. He was the guy who fixed everybody on the field. When you don't have that and no one vocal has stepped up, you're missing that line of communication. You're missing that quarterback on your field. So having him back, Cam Butler actually said he thinks they're going to stop having those big explosive plays that they allowed in the game. So having him back, I feel like is an under-talked topic around Virginia football. So I do like that in that safety room. But again, that cornerback room, if there's an injury, I'm a little worried about them. Obviously, you have Jam Jackson and Malcolm Green and Kendron Smith having kind of alternating between safety and corner. But it's still that question mark of, can they have enough depth if there's anyone hurt? And they haven't had a season where they haven't had injuries in that secondary. So that is something to watch out. But again, last year they had 1,400 snaps of true freshmen. A lot of those snaps coming in on the defense. So you're hoping that those freshmen like Dre Walker, all of them, Caleb Hardy at safety, all of them will have more experience, which means the defense will be better.
Let me talked about Cam Robinson. He's someone who, if you're not super familiar with Virginia football, let me tell you, this guy is a star. I watched him on defense a lot last year, and he just looks like I would not be surprised if the season ends and he's all ACC at linebacker. He is that good.
No, and actually Dorian Jones, we talked to him today, and he was like, yeah, man, Cam Robinson is the real deal. Cam Robinson is such a good linebacker. Even Mike Adams, when we first talked to him in the spring, brought up Cam Robinson as well. When he first had the introduction and seeing Cam, he's a freshman All-American. He was named one on 24/7 Sports as well, in their freshman All-American team. So he certainly grabbed attention. I still remember his recruiting. It was a whirlwind 2 weeks before early signing day with Florida State and South Carolina coming to get him. And they wanted him. There was a high priority kid, and there's a reason for it, right? Because he was really good. So he's the linebacker position. That's where Virginia's hoping that they could have a better run defense last year. And they're really, like, Mike Adams has been really focusing on your run fits and making sure you get those at Virginia. Mike Adams has been a very strict guy when it comes to that. You hear him shouting when you're out there and during practices. And I think Cam Robinson could be poised for, I wouldn't say breakout year, because obviously last year was a breakout year, but you're hoping this is when he can elevate his skill a little bit more. And if he's doing that, it's kind of a twofold thing for Virginia. Not only you have success on the field, but his success will help you recruit in-state, right? Because that is an in-state player that decided not to go out of state to a Florida State or a South Carolina, did not go to the SEC. He stayed home, and he's still getting the national accolades. So Cam Robinson not only should help you on the field, but his success on the field is going to help you recruiting-wise. That's why getting these guys in state is so crucial for Virginia, and getting Chris Tyree back, getting Andre Green back. All those guys are going to help you recruiting-wise if they have success. So that's the one that I feel like is the most important player for Virginia right now.
Jim?
Now let's take a quick look at this schedule, because it's interesting. It starts out with potential, and if things come together, if we don't have injuries, et cetera, all that. But the back end of it starts to get a little bit dicey. There are a couple of games in there which are going to be tough. What's your feeling about how the team is going to end up overall with this schedule?
I'm actually just pulling up the schedule on my phone so I can kind of look through it too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I, like I said, I think the first 4 games are the most important games for Virginia, right? Mm-hmm. I could even argue the first 5, because when you start off at Richmond, no disrespect to Richmond at home in Charlottesville, you want to win on your first game against Richmond. That is a must-win game. Again, at Wake Forest, I feel like that is a game that could determine the season. Especially if they go to Wake Forest and they don't show up or have issues. I think that is the game where I've circled on my calendar, but like, this could determine how the season goes for Virginia. Against Maryland at home, I feel like that's a winnable game for Virginia. I think Maryland's got a lot of question marks, and having this game played in Charlottesville, I think Virginia has a shot. I think it's 50-50. at Coastal Carolina, I really hate the fact they have to go to at Coastal Carolina for this non-conference game. But Virginia should win that one as well. Boston College being in Charlottesville is another winnable game. This is Bill O'Brien's first year at Boston College. A lot of questions for BC. They should have beat Boston College at Boston College last year. That was Tony Muskin's first game back from injury, and they did really good. And in the second half, they just didn't show up, right? So you're hoping to play all 4 quarters. See that, and then things start getting really, really tough for Virginia. The next few games, Louisville at Clemson, North Carolina, although North Carolina and Charlottesville, I mean, I want to pick already UVA for that one. Then you go at Pitt, at Notre Dame. I mean, at Pitt is an awful contest for Virginia every single time they go up to Pittsburgh. At Notre Dame, that's going to be a hard game for Virginia. SMU, I think, is going to be a very good team this year. And then at Virginia Tech, I mean, I've said, I don't know how many times, oh, Virginia, could be the year they get close. But I mean, I can't say that. It's just too much right now for Blacksburg. So, I mean, the first 5 games will determine the season, because they could, if they win the first 5 games, I think they bowl. I think they go to a bowl game. Because they can just steal one more game in the second half. But if they don't win 4 to 5 games in that first 5 games, it's going to be hard to go to a bowl game. Just because, my goodness, at Notre Dame, at Clemson, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, I mean, that, and had SMU at home. I mean, that's a tough schedule.
Yeah, it is. It is very challenging. I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on, do they reach that magic 6 to make it to a bowl this year? That's going to be interesting.
I think there's definitely a roadmap. I feel like there is, like, there's so many 50-50 games in the ACC that and honestly against Maryland too, that I feel like there's a possibility there. But you have to, it has to be front loaded with wins for Virginia. You need to go off of a fast start. If you don't go off to a fast start, it's going to be a little bit tougher, because then you get the wear and tear of the season for UVA on your bodies, and you're having your worst games in the second half of the year, or toughest games in your second half of the season. And the problem is, most of them is on the road, right? Let's say if Clemson was in Charlottesville, obviously Clemson's still going to be a favorite, but you're also at home. You don't have to deal with the travel. You're traveling to Death Valley. The emotion of Tony Elliott returning to Clemson. I mean, it's a lot. Yeah, I think the first 4 to 5 games will be big for Virginia. It'll determine if they go to a bowl game or not.
Will, any last questions?
Yeah, actually, since we were talking about, this is kind of the first year we can really judge Tony Elliott, and I'm just kind of looking at where we last left this team, and just how they have all gotten all this momentum from transfer portal recruiting with Chris Tyree. They had a really strong start to the 2025 class, and have picked it up over the weekend with a big commitment. How has that happened?
Just the momentum that they got after
yeah.
Well, I think it's a credit to the recruiting support staff. Because, the way that Virginia recruits, they don't offer a lot of kids. So they had to create this messaging to kids to understand, when we offer you, you're a take. Because I think like Louisville and Pitt have over 500 offers out there right now, and only Clemson, Virginia, and I think North Carolina are the 3 schools that don't offer as many kids. I know obviously Clemson and Virginia don't. So you have to get that messaging up. And what Virginia has done a good job of pinpointing guys in the portal instantaneously. I mean, Andre Green was in the portal, and Tony Elliott was in Chapel Hill within 2 hours. He was having fried chicken and eating with Andre Green. And that quickness is what sealed the deal for him. I mean, he visited Penn State. He went to Marcus Higgins, who also recruited him at UVA. But he chose Virginia because of how quick they recruited him. And obviously Malik Washington and his success did help as well. And then Chris Tyree with the same thing. Once you get those in-state guys, those veteran in-state guys that were very well liked in the Richmond community to believe in you, you get the momentum. Chris Tyree got the momentum going. I mean, I remember hearing from coaches in the 804 in the Richmond area talking about, do you see what Virginia is doing? They're getting our kids back in state.
Yeah.
So having those kids back, and that's why I keep saying, like, those in-state kids, the Cam Robinsons, the Chris Tyree, the Andre Greens, their success on the field or lack of success in the other way will determine how Virginia does in-state recruiting moving forward. So they did a great job of recruiting the guys they needed and going and winning those battles really quickly. They did it, the first year it was a little harder on them because they were still new to the process of the transfer portal. They also didn't understand a lot of the guidelines of UVA, right? The transfer. I mean, they had guys that had high GPAs turned down to go into Virginia. So they learned those hurdles. They also weren't, dealing with, and having, emotional issues in mourning. So that's why they also were able to kind of get that momentum wise, but they also had more time to preparation. They knew who was going to go in the portal a little bit earlier with people announcing they were going to go in the portal. So I believe Chris Tyree announced he was going to portal a week before he actually entered the portal. So you're able to do your due diligence a little bit in that regard as well. So you have that in your ability, but it's just creating those relationships. And then you also have, guys that they were able to have relationships previously. That's why whenever I tell people, it's like, why are they recruiting this guy? He's a 4-star, 5-star. I was like, yeah, but do you know he's going to enter the portal in 2-3 years? You don't. So you recruit him now and you still recruit him later. And that's what Virginia is also able to do. Adam Mims has been done a great job on the recruiting trail. He's a very strong, he obviously got Josiah Abdullah this past week. And I think that's been the biggest thing, is using these in-state kids to talk among them and using that recruiting energy from your guys. It's the recruiting support staff did a great job, but once you get the right kids in there, they recruit other kids. That's what Virginia was missing in those first 2 years. They didn't have those personalities that will go out and recruit other guys. Anthony Calandria is one that did that in the portal as well. You need those characters. Virginia lacked those big, boisterous recruiting characters. I remember the last time I covered Virginia and they had those guys. Quinn Blanding was one of those guys. Andrew Brown was one of those guys. They recruited the 757 for Virginia. Yes, the staff did a good job. Mike London, Chip West, all those guys, but it was the players that recruited guys. So that's the difference that Virginia has. They have those players.
So nice to see Tyree back in the state, because he's literally from my backyard, and I often wondered why he had gone out to South Bend, but it's neither here nor there. But it's nice to see him back. So it's all good. It's all good. Hey, our special thanks to Jacquie Franciulli for joining us. She is the publisher of Wahoos 24/7, and a great look at what's coming up for the 2024 version of the Cavaliers. Thank you so much, Jacquie, for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, and maybe we'll do this mid-season again. There's 2 bye weeks this year, so we have a choice.
Yeah, thanks, Jacquie.
Thanks for listening to ACC Nation. Be sure to listen, like and subscribe to our podcast, radio, and YouTube channels by visiting accnation.net. Follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, Mastodon, Threads, Blue Sky and Reddit at ACC Nation.
ACC Nation.